Sunday nights at 9 here on the Weather Channel.
The center line of the track is somewhere around the center of Louisiana. And if you look at the cone, the western edge of the cone is the western edge of Louisiana. The eastern edge of the cone is the eastern edge of Louisiana. So I can tell you that the National Weather Service is very confident right now, 3.5 days in advance of landfall, that a hurricane is going to strike the state of Louisiana this week.
He has been speaking to his state a lot this season. Once again, Louisiana finds itself in that forecast cone, this time for Hurricane Delta. Currently a Category 4 hurricane, 145-mile-per-hour winds, making its way closer to its first stop on the Yucatan before making its way out over the Gulf and then eventually here to the United States. Right now, 215 miles east-southeast of Cozumel, looking like places like Cozumel. Cancun will be seeing some direct impacts from this high-res enhanced satellite. We have been watching this thing really intensifying here and now making its way closer and closer again to portions of the tip of the Yucatan Peninsula. Dr. Nab showing that blow up of thunderstorms closer to the center. Now, the area of the strongest winds is fairly small in scope, but still, you find yourself in there. They're packing quite a punch. Tropical storm warnings remain in effect for areas around the Cayman Islands, western portions of Cuba, but the hurricane warnings are in effect for parts of the Yucatan. That includes Cancun. We look at the forecast beyond this point, out over the Gulf. I think, as Dr. Nab said, don't want you to get hung up on the fact that we do anticipate this to strengthen because it could be increasing in size, which Dr. Nab means that more people will get in on the effects. But people look at this cone and kind of wonder, what the heck's going on? It seems to be making its way to the northwest, then turns back the other direction.
It certainly is going to make a right-hand turn, but exactly when that right-hand turn occurs and how sharp it is will make all the difference for who gets the worst of it. Because could we see Lake Charles get hit by a major hurricane again? It's within the realm of possibility. Could we see New Orleans, that caught some breaks so far this year for the most part, get hit directly by a major hurricane? That is also within the realm of possibility. The cone is pretty wide, and as the governor mentioned, it covers the whole state of Louisiana. Can't rule out portions of southeast Texas and Mississippi getting a direct hit as it comes ashore. And again, it's going to be a pretty strong and large system. But because of 3 days out, the uncertainty in track intensity and size, especially track, has a big factor here. We can't pinpoint who's going to get the hurricane force winds. We just know that the chances are greatest there along the central and western coasts of Louisiana. But New Orleans, you are in a non-trivial chance, so is southeast Texas, and the chances go inland a little bit. And then for tropical storm force winds, it's nearly a certainty for much of the Louisiana coast in the southern half of that state, but the risk goes inland as well. And when you look at what we're trying to do to get this track forecast to be as accurate as possible, Mike was talking about the hurricane hunters being out there. This is the NOAA jet, the G4 jet that is collecting data over the data-sparse Gulf of Mexico. Now it's going to circumnavigate the hurricane, and that data will go into the models. And hopefully we'll get these into a little bit better agreement because, Mike, those are the Weather Service models, and the European model is even farther to the left, which puts Lake Charles and Beaumont certainly into play. So still hard to really pinpoint where this is going to make landfall.
Everyone needs to pay attention. That's what the bottom line is at this point. And we know that New Orleans, we've had a lot of close calls this hurricane season. Once again, we're in the cone. How many more times can we do this, right? 6 times in the forecast cone this season. Houston, we've been in it 5 times. Miami, 3 different times. And we know that we took a devastating blow with Hurricane Katrina back in 2005. It shined light on how devastating a tropical system can be for New Orleans. The city has since made drastic improvements to the levee system there. But the question always is it enough? Meteorologist Mark Elliott takes a look at the danger in the Big Easy.
New Orleans sits close to the hurricane-prone Gulf, surrounded by water and dissected by canals. And worse, much of the city sits below sea level. New Orleans is built in a bowl. Once water comes into the city, it has nowhere to go, trapping residents and making evacuation almost impossible. That can lead to a large loss of life. The Army Corps of Engineers has implemented a risk reduction system, but it is not a risk elimination system. During Katrina, storm surge rushed into the city when flood walls failed, drowning the lower 9th Ward with water up to roofs. Today, it would be different. These walls should stand, but a strong hurricane coming at just the wrong angle can produce storm surge even higher than these massive walls. Water would pour into the city even without a levee failure, and the calculation is a wrong Category 2 hurricane could be enough to do it. As neighborhoods like the lower 9th Ward rebuild behind the flood walls, there's a new and surprising worry. Officials' biggest concern is complacency. The city hasn't seen a large storm since Katrina, and they are worried people will find reasons not to listen to evacuation orders. Residents need to evacuate, but evacuating isn't easy in the Big Easy. One estimate is that it could take 44 hours to get everybody out of New Orleans and to clear the roads.
Well, still to come on Weather Underground, our coverage of Hurricane Delta continues. Cat 4 monster now nearing Cozumel and Cancun. The U.S. Gulf Coast on high alert for later in the week. And from Hurricane Wilma 15 years ago to Delta right now, we explain why this part of the Caribbean, no stranger to rapid intensification.
Domino's knows deliver.
Oh my gosh! Jaw-dropping.
Nope, 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 all the way back home.
It doesn't get better than this.
Don't miss all new episodes of Weather Gone Viral, Sunday nights at 9, here on the Weather Channel. Get your daily dose of everything weather.
Wow! Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
Welcome back to Weather Underground's continuing coverage here of Hurricane Delta. How about the long lines for us right now in Merida, Mexico? These are the long lines for gas as a Category 4 hurricane is bearing down on the Yucatan Peninsula. This is just south of Cancun, if you're wondering. And a lot of tourists flock to this part of the world. They've got beautiful beaches there. The sand there is almost kind of like oatmeal under your feet, and they are in grave danger right now. We bring you the latest on Delta. 145-mile-per-hour winds. Yesterday morning, it got named and got 40-mile-per-hour designation. So from yesterday morning to now, it's increased 105 miles per hour. West-northwest movement at 17 miles per hour. Pressures drop like a rock. 956 millibars for us right now. We're in warm sea surface temperatures right now, and the water is very warm even down to depth here, and the wind shear is displaced all off. Well, hundreds and hundreds of miles off to the north. May not really encounter wind shear to tear it apart until it gets closer to a landfall in the United States, but all along it looks like conditions are favorable to, at the very least, Alex, sustain its current strength, but the forecast is for it to go even higher.
Absolutely. And Delta, the fastest storm to intensify from a tropical depression to a Cat 4 hurricane in modern Atlantic records. So, Dr. Knapp, we've seen this happen with other storms. What is it about this area of the Caribbean that's fueling this kind of rapid intensification?
You know, part of it is just that, fuel, and a whole lot of it, but that's not the entire story. Look at the history of this area after September. So these are late season major hurricanes that got to Cat 4 and 5 over the Northwest Caribbean, and in the case of Wilma, made it up to Florida as a Category 3 hurricane. All of these names you see on the map here, those names have been retired. So when you get a Cat 4 or 5 form in the Northwest Caribbean, it's going to be bad one way or another for somebody or a lot of people. And, this one is going to come up into this part of the Gulf of Mexico, so a little bit unusual in that regard, but certainly not unusual to see a major hurricane forming in the Northwest Caribbean. And it is partly because of the very warm sea surface temperatures. And this year, they are warmer than average in this part of the basin. But when you look at the Atlantic Basin overall, there's a lot of warm sea surface temperatures in the Gulf and out in the deep tropical Atlantic. But look in here in the Caribbean, especially the Northwest Caribbean, when you look beneath the surface, there is very warm water to significant depth. So as the hurricane is getting its act together and strengthening, as it churns up the water and water comes up from below, it's not bringing up cooler water from below, it's just bringing up more warm water. So if the sea surface temperatures are the fuel, then the deep warm water of the Western Caribbean is like fuel injection. You just keep getting more and more of that energy. Now, weak wind shear is certainly contributing to what Delta has been able to do. Big area of high pressure that you often see over Central America and southern Mexico this time of year. And if you look at the average pattern, jet stream activity over the continental U.S. with the fronts coming through, but you leave very weak wind shear over Central America, southern Mexico, and the Northwest Caribbean. And that is what is going to allow this system to continue to strengthen, maybe even all the way up to the time it makes landfall in Cozumel, Cancun. But this track is a little bit unusual to potentially have a major hurricane making landfall maybe in Louisiana from a Cat 4 or 5 that forms in the Northwestern Caribbean. We haven't seen that this time of year very often, but we have seen, Mike, a lot of Cat 4s and 5s that make landfall as Cat 3s but are really big and really bad.
The whole forecast and the history of it is ominous, no question. Dr. Knabb, thank you. We'll get back to our hurricane coverage in just a moment. Want to update you on the other big story that we're following. Of course, the fires in the West. Crews getting better handle of one of California's most destructive fires this year. This here, folks, 50% containment on the Glass fire burning across the wine country here. Good news that they're at least getting some containment on that. All right, so let's bring you the very latest we've had. Now, 4 million acres consumed in California alone. So the numbers keep going up for us here, folks, and it's just not getting any better, unfortunately. We do have some rain coming in, and that's a good thing. But look at the August complex fire. 938,000 acres have been consumed, the largest fire in California history. You take a look at the changes that are coming by the middle of the week. Here we go. Now we're getting big changes and undulations in the jet stream, and that's going to allow an atmospheric river to dive in here to Washington, Oregon, Northern California, Central California as well, and that's going to aid, bring in some rain right in the places where we need it too. That's the forecast, and in some spots here, it's going to be huge, as much as 5 to 8 inches of rain. But even if we get an inch, that's enough to help. But the rain doesn't begin until Friday, so we're still several days away, but the rain should be well placed Friday, Saturday, and Sunday right over locations where the fires are burning. Well, still to come on Weather Underground, our special extended coverage if Hurricane Delta continues. Dr. Knabb coming back, breaking down the latest models, potential future track as it heads to the northern Gulf Coast. On Weather Underground, dangerous days ahead in the tropics. Hurricane Delta exploding into an intense category for a hurricane today. Sustained winds now at 145 miles per hour and expected to strengthen even more. Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, including Cozumel and Cancun, now facing its strongest hurricane strike in 15 years. We will take you there for the latest.
U.S. Gulf Coast also on high alert for what could be a disastrous strike later this week. Our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knabb, breaks down the latest scenarios for extreme winds, destructive storm surge, and flooding rainfall. It's all next on a special extended edition of Weather Underground.
Here we go again, folks. Thanks for being with us on Weather Underground. I'm Mike Bettis.
I'm Alex Wilson. Right now, all eyes on Hurricane Delta, an intense hurricane threatening Mexico and the United States.
All right, here's what conditions like today in the Caribbean. In the island of Grand Cayman, a little breezy for them. You take a look right now, you've got some blue out there, but the hurricane's going past, and the next target is going to be the Yucatan Peninsula. We'll include the island of Cozumel and then the resort town of Cancun. Let's get right to our hurricane expert, former director of the National Hurricane Center, Dr. Rick Knabb. This thing is dangerous looking, Dr. Knabb, could strengthen even more before its landfall.
Expected rapid intensification from yesterday to today, and we got it and then some. My goodness. These small systems sure can ramp up in a hurry. This has an eye that's only about 5 miles across, and when they're really small like this, they can increase in intensity very, very rapidly. Wilma in 2005 was a Northwest Caribbean October hurricane that had about a 2-mile wide eye, and it went from tropical storm to Category 5 in 24 hours. This has gone from tropical storm to Category 4 in 24 hours, so not quite as fast as Wilma, which is kind of the record setter, but fast enough, bad enough, and it's moving west-northwest at 17 miles an hour straight for the Cancun-Cozumel area, so time is running out. Later this evening, weather will go downhill, and the landfall in northeastern Yucatan would be tomorrow morning, maybe breakfast time, plus or minus, and then it will be getting into the Gulf of Mexico. Look on the visible imagery, you can't even make out an eye. When's the last time you looked at a Cat 4 and you can't see the eye? But when they're so small like this, conventional satellite imagery even is struggling to find the eye. Even on the highest resolution imagery we have, it's just a minute or two apart of the images, you can't make out the eye really clearly, but you can see the bubbling of the overshooting tops, especially when we get near sunset. My goodness, that is some serious convection, and you can just tell that this is an energetic system. And because it's not going to spend a whole lot of time over land, we don't think there's going to be much weakening, and it will have plenty of time to re-strengthen over the Gulf of Mexico. And because we have no data, no indication to tell us that that small eye is about to disintegrate, maybe a larger eye take over, we expect at least to maintain its intensity, maybe get a little bit stronger between now and the time it gets to Yucatan. And then maybe it weakens, but maybe it gets larger as it approaches the northern Gulf Coast. Let's look at that portion of the cone. The forecast 3 days from now is very close to the Louisiana coastline at an intensity of 125 miles an hour. If that's right, that would be right near the Cat 3-4 threshold. And we are pretty sure it's going to be a larger system by the time it gets up in here. So even if it doesn't make landfall on the northern Gulf Coast, as strong as it is now and as strong as it will in Yucatan, this is going to be a large, potentially major hurricane on the wind scale. Big-time storm surge event. Evacuations almost certainly going to be called. Big-time wind event at the coast and inland. Rain event. And all the hazards that we associate with major hurricanes, we got to get ready for. And we have until probably Friday around this time before the winds of Tropical Storm 4 start arriving in much of Louisiana. But this hurricane is forecast to grow in size. And if it does that and or it speeds up, the tropical storm conditions could get there a little sooner. So I would suggest that everybody get ready by the time you go to bed Thursday night. Have what you need, be where you're going to be, so that if things deteriorate on Friday sooner than we think, Alex, that you are ready for that. So it's tonight, tomorrow, and Thursday that are our main prep times for what's going to be a significant event for the U.S. once again.
Yes. Once again in this very, very busy year. Want to get you up to speed on what we know right now about Hurricane Delta. States of emergency have been issued in Louisiana and Alabama. Alabama Governor Kay Ivey is ordering a mandatory evacuation of all tourists and visitors in coastal communities starting first thing tomorrow. Now in New Orleans, the city says all 99 sewage and drainage pumps are open and ready for potential flooding. Hurricane Delta throwing in a wrench to anybody's vacation plans in Playa del Carmen, Mexico. That is just near Cancun. Tourists say the Mexican government actually notified them today to evacuate ahead of Delta's arrival. And the worst of the effects there will be during the day tomorrow. So the window to get out and get to safety is closing. 145 mile per hour right now. Category 4 hurricane making its way to the west-northwest. 17 miles per hour is that movement. Hurricane warnings currently in effect there around Cancun, around Cozumel, and even some areas under tropical storm warnings. But where we anticipate the worst of the surge, that would include Cancun and Cozumel down to Tulum, about 6 to 9 feet of storm surge. Then we talk about rainfall, could be around 3 to 5 inches. But for Cancun, the winds are going to start to pick up tonight through later tomorrow. The strongest of winds, those 70-plus mile per hour winds, will be out there Wednesday morning. So again, that's why we say the window to get to safety, to evacuate if you need to, That one's closing pretty quickly. Hurricane force winds, it's a pretty compact area there within the storm, but you can see tropical storm force winds extend well away from the center of that storm. So we could be looking at a storm packing a punch for a good part of the Yucatan. That is until it makes its way into the Gulf, and then we've got to watch it here in the U.S. In terms of rainfall, European model, again, showing that 3 to 5 inch range right there across the tip of the Yucatan. And then we go to the GFS. This one paints a little rainier picture, but either way, the good thing is that the storm is moving, so we don't anticipate, feet of rainfall with that glancing blow. What could be a potent blow, but again, not going to hang around for days. That's going to limit the amount of rainfall we see in some of these locations. But Mike, the GFS does paint a little bit soggier of a picture.
Now, the key here is, what will this thing do once it gets into the Gulf of Mexico? Dr. Knabb, the models seem pretty well fixed on the northern Gulf of Mexico here. A lot of people are probably asking and wondering here, how big is it going to be? How intense is it going to be? Where exactly will this thing end up?
Yeah, when the steering currents are pretty well defined, that gives us high confidence that this is going to come ashore on the central Gulf Coast of the United States. But you also will notice that it's going to be slowing down a little bit as it makes that right-hand turn, and there's still 3+ days of time for a lot of things to change that could make all the difference between who gets the worst part of the hurricane and who doesn't, who gets the worst storm surge and who doesn't. And look at how many of you are within that cone, the probable area of where the center of circulation is going to go. And we can't even guarantee that it stays within the cone. It probably will in this case because of the relatively well-defined steering currents, but there's a lot of room for variability in here. And because of that uncertainty in track, as well as uncertainty in intensity and size, we can't tell you who is going to get hurricane force winds. New Orleans, it is absolutely possible. Lake Charles, absolutely possible. So even if you got hit earlier this year, or if you've caught a break earlier this year, that doesn't mean you will or won't get hit this time. Everybody's got to prepare. And look at the large area at a greater than 50-50 shot at any one spot of tropical storm force winds. So we don't know who's going to get the worst, but the chances are pretty high that this will be a large and strong enough system for a lot of you to get at least tropical storm conditions. The NOAA G4 jet is out there collecting data over the otherwise data-sparse Gulf of Mexico, get the data into the models, try to get them into better agreement. The U.S. models are in relatively good agreement, but you see one goes over New Orleans, one goes, the few of them go over the central part of Louisiana. And then when you look at the European model, the colors are the low-level spin, and go a couple days from now, you can see high-pressure ridge in the white lines off to the east. That's what's going to steer it around to the north and then eventually the northeast. But the European model is a little farther to the left. The southeast Texas, don't take your eye off this. Lake Charles, this would be a more threatening track for you. So Europeans a little farther left than the GFS and the other American models. So there's still plenty of uncertainty here. Eventually, big trough will be in the west, and this will take what's left of Delta and move it into the eastern part of the U.S. But again, the GFS, while it's similar in the big picture, we know it's going to make landfall on the northern Gulf Coast. It's a little farther right than the European model. So don't want anybody to look at the middle of that cone and think it's definitely going to do that, Alex. Yeah.
We've seen the tracks change and evolve in our past storms, and the Louisiana coast is really no stranger to the tropical threat this season. Remember, late August, we saw the surge invade the coast in Lafourche Parish. This was from Hurricane Laura. Significant surge there. Now, once again, we're facing a storm surge threat, a serious one, along the Louisiana coast. So, Dr. Knabb, this is a part of the Gulf Coast that is very susceptible to storm surge.
And you don't want to just pay attention to the intensity to get an understanding of why that storm surge threat is so high. We also got to worry about the size of the hurricane. And right now, the conditions are just ideal, unfortunately, to support a major hurricane all the way into the Gulf of Mexico. Very weak wind shear. But then, when it gets into the Gulf of Mexico, the water temperatures are below average in the northern Gulf as compared to the above average water temperatures in the Northwest Caribbean. But even though the waters are cooler in the northern Gulf than they usually are and are cooler than in the Northwest Caribbean, they're still well into the 80s. So the water is warm enough to support a major hurricane, but maybe the water temperatures, along with a probable increase in wind shear when it gets closer to landfall on the northern Gulf Coast, it's not the kind of situation where we expect rapid intensification up to the time of landfall, a la Hurricane Laura. But a lot of things other than that could change along the way. One scenario that seems quite possible is that you get this small hurricane, Cat 4, hopefully not Cat 5 tonight in Cancun, Cozumel, and then maybe the interaction with land and eventual eyewall replacement cycles means we lose the small inner eye and we get a larger system with a bigger eye as it gets up into this vicinity and maybe re-strengthens to Cat 4 if it has weakened at all. Then you could have a bigger system that is moving northward over warm enough waters, but bigger systems don't weaken very quickly. So this cooler than average water in the northern Gulf Coast area doesn't really give me a whole lot of comfort that it's going to weaken quickly, because it's probably going to be a larger system as it's making its way up into this region. And even if it's 125 miles an hour, borderline Cat 3, 4, really strong major hurricane and really large, we're talking a major storm surge event. The intensity models don't show a drop off in the intensity until it makes landfall. And just look at the horizontal size that the global models are picking up on is when we get Thursday into Friday. Here's the European model. Look at the size of the circulation here. This is not likely to be a tiny hurricane when it's near the northern Gulf. So anything to the right of the center of circulation when it comes ashore is going to be a major storm surge event for the very vulnerable coastline of the north central Gulf Coast. Let's take a look not just at the Euro, but at the GFS. If you don't like how big the hurricane is in the Euro, you're going to like the GFS even less. My goodness, look at the size of this circulation as it comes ashore. So, Alex, we've got to start getting used to the idea that even if it's not as strong U.S. landfall as it is in Yucatan, it will probably be larger, and that makes it a big-time storm surge, rainmaker, and wind event for more people.
Right. You know, in some cases, a small, very powerful hurricane and a weaker but larger hurricane can be equal in terms of the damage they do, or sometimes the weaker but larger one can be even worse. Take a look at Biloxi, Mississippi right now. A place I know very well. We've got some wet roads out there. It's pretty busy here along the Gulf. A lot of traffic, maybe some visitors in town. I know there's some good resorts, some good casinos to hang out at as well. This is one of the spots that we'll be looking at rainfall out of this storm. So I don't want to sleep on the rainfall threat. Flash flooding will be a possibility, especially towards a place like Biloxi, New Orleans, even over to New Iberia, Baton Rouge, Lafayette, Thursday into early Friday. These areas going to pick up some good rainfall, and that could lead to some flash flooding problems moving through those 24 hours or so. European model paints the heaviest rainfall a little farther west than the GFS does. You'll see that in just a moment. But again, some of the heaviest rain focused over portions of western Louisiana into the state of Texas, the eastern part of Texas. Now we look at the GFS model, and where that rainfall is heaviest is across western portions of Mississippi, and then getting into eastern parts and southern portions of the state of Louisiana. There we could see those 5 to 8 inch totals. Now, a lot of this region is above average when it comes to rainfall, and a few places are way above average. Both Jackson, Mississippi and Birmingham approaching 20 inches above average for the annual rainfall. Birmingham, gosh, you're what, 7/100ths away? New Orleans, Nashville, both over a half foot above average. And then we look at Lake Charles, Louisiana. They're below average, but of course they're still cleaning up from Laura, so they don't necessarily want to get in on that heavy rainfall. We look at your New Orleans 4-day forecast, or I should say 4-period forecast. Thursday and into Friday, really going to bring the highest chance of rain to the area into our Friday. That's when we've got thunderstorms and gusty winds, and temperatures will hold into the low 80s, Mike.
All right, still to come here on Weather Underground. Our coverage of Delta continues. This monster storm bearing down on Cozumel in Cancun, Mexico. The U.S. Gulf Coast on high alert for potentially destructive strikes later in the week. We're going to break down everything you need to know about this hurricane as it churns its way through the Caribbean. Could be on the precipice of a Category 5 tonight. Dr. Knapp, Alex Wilson, myself coming back here in just a few minutes. That's a live look. Grand Cayman Island in the Caribbean.
What would Joe Biden...
Unbelievable. This is real.
When your cameras roll, our experts react.
Jaw-dropping.
Weather Gone Viral, Sunday nights at 9, here on the Weather Channel. Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we.
From this point forward, conditions will continue to deteriorate.
Don't let COVID-19 take your eye off the tropics. This year's threat is more complex and dangerous than ever before.
Remain vigilant, pay close attention to the Weather Channel.
No one can cover this historic hurricane season better than the Weather Channel. Get the information you need to stay safe every day. Storm safety in a pandemic, all season long, right here on the Weather Channel.
And we are here on Weather Underground to arm you with the knowledge so that you can make great decisions when Hurricane Delta comes calling. It's a very intense hurricane right now, 145-mile-per-hour winds as it spins here in the Caribbean. It's getting closer and closer to the Yucatan Peninsula. Cozumel sits right here. It's a gorgeous little vacation destination, a lot of snorkeling and scuba diving there. Cancun sits here. I'm sure that a lot of us here in the United States are very familiar. Very popular place for Americans to go for vacation, but very vulnerable to hurricanes, that's for sure. As soon as you get off of the hotel row there, the hurricane susceptibility goes through the roof because we have so many different neighborhoods that are susceptible to flooding, to high winds. 145-mile-per-hour winds right now, strong Category 4, west-northwest movement at 17 miles per hour. The pressure's been dropping like a rock today, and the wind speeds have responded by going up very, very quickly. And then once this gets into the Gulf of Mexico, coming past the Yucatan, then turning northbound here, we think Texas or Louisiana most likely to see a landfall come Friday. It could be as high as a Category 3 hurricane with the current forecast into Louisiana. When will we anticipate tropical storm force winds to get there? 39-mile-per-hour winds or higher. When are they coming? Likely sometime late Friday morning. So here's the Friday a.m. line. So it's going to be between Friday morning and Friday evening. We're anticipating conditions to go down very, very quickly here and anticipating a Friday landfall. Winds force tomorrow evening, so 24 hours from now. Breezy, basically out of the east, New Orleans, Houma, Baton Rouge, 10 to 15 miles per hour. Then as the system gets closer and closer, now here we are, overnight Thursday night into Friday morning, 4 a.m. Winds still basically from the east here, maybe even a slight south component. New Orleans and Houma, Baton Rouge, the winds have really started to crank up now. And notice where we could see a potential landfall, very close to where Category 4 Hurricane Laura made landfall. That is a really tough sight to see here. Right front quadrant, right in here. Strong storm surge, strong winds here on that right front quadrant. Friday evening, hurricane force winds here in Houma, gusting that high in New Orleans, 60 to 75 in Baton Rouge. But near that eye is where you're going to have the most intense winds and the most intense storm surge. Saturday pushing inland here, producing heavy rain, but the winds backing off Saturday, now coming out of the opposite direction, out of the west. Mostly 15 to 25 miles per hour, but it could be an intense rainmaker here in places that don't need any more rain. Very soaked here. 5 to 8 inches, 3 to 5 that extends up through the lower Mississippi River Valley here. Maybe, Alex, one of the saving graces with this, once it makes landfall, is it's anticipated to continue a pretty quick forward movement, at least quicker than previous hurricanes. So it's not sticking around for a long time, producing epic amounts of rain.
Yeah, as Dr. Knabb calls them, the category slow. We don't necessarily have that in the cards for us with this one. In Cancun, they're running out of time to prepare, so that meant long lines for gas as the people prepared for what could be the strongest tropical strike this area has seen in more than a decade. This is an area you'd go, gosh, they're right there in the Caribbean. How would they not get more? But it's been a while, at least when we talk about something as powerful or as expected powerful as Delta will be. We look at Gamma. Just had this one, a tropical storm, made landfall in Tulum yesterday, 70-mile-per-hour winds, pressure 980 millibars. We look at what happened with this storm yesterday. As of 1 o'clock, had the tropical storm watches and warnings because of Gamma. And then at 5 o'clock, we had to go under those hurricane warnings because of Delta. And this is exactly what Gamma did. You can see some of those little structures, but maybe the places you go for photos or, to grab a candlelight dinner out there on the water. No match for the winds and, or rather the waves from this one. And the next photo really goes to show you what we were up against in terms of the wind and the rain and the rough surf. I always say when you can't tell where the sky ends and the ocean begins, you're in the thick of it. Again, not nearly as powerful as what we're going to see, though, out of Delta. There's another view of some of the trees that were brought down, or tree limbs brought down, some of the damage from Gamma. Now we look at what's headed our way in terms of Delta and some of the past storms that would compare. Have to go back about 15 years. That's when Wilma made its way through this part of the Yucatan Peninsula. Of course, Gilbert from 1988, and then we also had two unnamed storms, 1903 and 1909. So it's been a while since this area has seen such a powerful storm. And Mike, we know all threats are on the table here. We've got the winds, we've got the storm surge, could see some rainfall, and so that's why they've told people, if you're a tourist, time to go is now.
Yeah, wisely so, too. And still to come on Weather Underground. Hurricane Hunter missions ongoing right now. Delta roars toward the Yucatan, eventually the U.S. Gulf Coast. We have the latest on what the planes are finding right now and if Delta is continuing to intensify. Don't forget, you can always get everything on Delta on social media as well. Join us on Patrick.
A smile. America's most trusted TV news network.
We've got a severe weather threat.
Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
The Weather Channel. Get your daily dose of everything weather on Quibi. From the viral
Now to the weather video that we cannot stop watching.
to the vital
Get ready because we are in for another wet week.
and all the wonderful weather in between.
Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
All right, some video to show you here. This in Grand Cayman. This is pretty amazing stuff here. Check this out. I don't believe that that's Mexico.
No, it's definitely Grand Cayman,
Island.
like Grand Cayman.
But look at the waves. And now keep in mind this, folks. The hurricane's already gone past, but it's already really churned up the water out there. And we are really concerned about what kind of storm surge that Hurricane Delta could produce.
Yeah, and this goes to show you how far away what it's doing to the ocean. And so that concern is there, not just for Mexico, but even here in the U.S. So we are tracking all things Delta here on Weather Underground. I'm Alex Wilson.
I'm Mike Bettis with you for extended live coverage tonight. We'll be with you until 9 o'clock Eastern Time. We'll have live coverage through midnight. And then eventually we'll have round-the-clock coverage, Alex, as we feel like this is going to make a very significant strike on the northern Gulf Coast.
Yeah, we're going to be watching it all the way into the end of the week. Mike, the hurricane hunters are out, and they've actually changed their position because of the storm.
Yeah, the Air Force Hurricane Hunters, they're based at Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi. They're now moving over to San Antonio to the Joint Air Force Base there, and they'll base there, and they'll be flying the missions out of Texas for the safety of the crew and the planes. But the NOAA planes fly out of Lakeland, Florida here. We've got upper level and we've got low level flights that go out. The low level P3 mission is going out right now. We've got an ongoing mission with the jet that's out there, and then tomorrow we'll have another low level. Basically at this point, folks, you can almost bank on continuous missions from both the NOAA Hurricane Hunters as well as the Air Force Hurricane Hunters. Invaluable data here, Dr. Knabb, for us to know exactly what these hurricanes are doing. You know, I think you've mentioned it many times. There really is no other meteorological organization in the world that does it this way.
No, this is the only part of the world where we have routine aircraft reconnaissance. And you just showed NOAA is providing two different kinds of planes. That the NOAA G4 jet, the NOAA 49, it's flying over the Gulf of Mexico and around the hurricane, getting dropsonde data into the models to help the track forecast. And now let me show you where the NOAA P3 is. Now here's where the hurricane is, southeast of Cancun. Cat 4 hurricane. We're going to get an intermediate public advisory here by 8 p.m. Eastern time, next hour to hour and a half or so. And that will have the benefit of the NOAA hurricane hunters. Again, they take off from Lakeland, Florida at their new base, and they're making their way just near western Cuba right now and will be coming in from the north. So, within the next several minutes to an hour, we should have data from inside the hurricane to see if it has maintained its intensity, has it gotten any stronger. That data from inside the storm will go into the intermediate public advisory for the hurricane specialist at NHC for 8 p.m. Visible imagery, we're going to lose it pretty soon, but let's take one last couple of looks here at how it looks as it gets closer and closer to Cancun and Cozumel. Again, because it's so small, the eye, last time we had the hurricane hunters in there, only about 5 miles across, so you really can't make that out. But on the high-resolution, frequent GOES imagery, you can see how that this continuous bubbling effect, even though you can't make out the eye. It's just so small. Conventional imagery isn't picking it up. And because it's still holding together, we think that small eye, there's every reason to believe it will hold on to its intensity or maybe get a little bit stronger. Now, at some point, it's probable with land interaction or just eye wall replacement cycles that small inner eye will go away and we'll get a larger eye. And then we'll have potentially a system that's Cat 3 or 4 over the southern Gulf where the waters are warm and the shear is weak. But then we could have a very large major hurricane moving toward the northern Gulf Coast in about 3 days. So it might not be as strong at northern Gulf Coast landfall as it is at Yucatan landfall, but don't let that slightly lesser intensity make you think, oh, this isn't going to be that big a deal, because a large system, we know from the Ritas and the Katrinas and Dennis and all of these systems that were Cat 2 or Cat 3, like Ike was a Cat 2, Alex, and it was one of the most expensive hurricanes we've ever had. So, it's not all about what the wind category is.
Absolutely. So now is the time to prepare. Hopefully you're already prepared given what we've had already this season. But if not, time to act is right now because the storm is coming. You have a little bit of time. Most important thing is to leave when you're instructed to do so. Make sure that you've got a safe evacuation route already in mind. And take your pets with you. Take all necessary supplies for them. Make sure you've got their records. Make sure you've got leashes and collars for them. Make sure you've got food and water for them. You want to shut off your home utilities, unplug appliances. Take your vehicle and your house keys with you. And, of course, pack essentials. We talk about toiletries. We talk about food, non-perishables, water for every person. And, of course, things like medication, things to keep you occupied, and chargers. Much more coming up on Delta here on Weather Underground.
Daddy, what's that big moving
I would ask people not to focus so much on that and just to prepare for a major hurricane. And all of the damaging winds, the damaging surge, and the damaging rain, whether it's from flash flooding or river flooding that hurricanes can bring.
That is Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards. He has had a lot of experience giving these pre-storm press conferences here in 2020, right? New Orleans has been in a lot of forecast cones, and no exception here with Delta. 145-mile-per-hour storm right now. That's a Category 4 hurricane. So, yeah, between yesterday and today, we have seen some really significant intensification. Yucatan Peninsula, you're up next with this potent storm that's going to offer the wind, going to offer the rain, and, of course, the surge. And because of that, we are under hurricane warnings here, and you can see the intensity of that on that satellite picture. Now, beyond the Yucatan, we're going to be watching this approaching the Gulf Coast, Mike. And again, right now, we're looking at really the entire coastline of Louisiana in that forecast track.
It's not a surprise. Probably the folks that live there, close calls over and over again this season. And in New Orleans, the one city that's been in the forecast cone more than any other city, this season. 6 different times we've been in the forecast cone. Houston 5, Miami 3, New York, Charleston on down the line there. But you take a look at the storms that we've had in and around New Orleans. Beta, Laura, Cristobal, Marco, Sally, all of those causing us issues here in the northern Gulf Coast. But no worse for wear. Not a lot of rain from any of them. Not a lot of wind. In fact, not even tropical storm force winds. Now, we know that people even in New Orleans are starting to get a little weary of all the tropical threats here. Earlier today, how about a sign spotted on the causeway near Lake Pontchartrain? Did you see it? Jim Cantore, stay home, is what it read. Anytime Jim comes to call on Alex, we know it's typically making people nervous.
Yeah, I saw him in the office today, and I just ran away from him. I think he was a little offended, but can you blame me?
Nope.
But how do we beat the fatigue? How do we make sure that people are still ready, still staying updated on Delta, even though I know we're all sick and tired? Joining us now, New Orleans EMA Director Colin Arnold. Colin, thank you so much for joining us. You got to be sick of seeing our people. You know, you live along the coast, you know the deal there, but how do you keep people to stay engaged even when they want to tune out?
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Mike. No, we love you guys, and you're a great source of information for us and for our community as well. So really, you have to look at it. I look at it the other way, and that is, you know, we've been tested this year. As you said, this is the 6th time. But we've got our public safety. I mean, we haven't even been able to put our boats away, you know. So the last 8 weeks has been kind of this leaning forward, just being prepared. And look, this has come around over and over again, and we've been ready every time. And I'm really proud of our residents because when we ask them to do this, they listen. And I don't expect anything different this time as well. And we're looking at something that is, you know, very unpredictable and quite uncertain right now, but certainly something that is we have to watch all the way in.
Colin, obviously the forecast gets a lot of people's attention, already Category 4, and you've gone through, I don't really want to say it this way, but kind of like a lot of trial runs up to this point, right? Been fortunate to be, you know, mostly unscathed. Anything that you learned from the previous storms this season that might help you with Delta?
Well, certainly. I mean, we've had 5 near misses, so every time you're able to take something away from every storm, and I think it's been, you know, really educational this year because we've had to deal with the pandemic in conjunction with this, and there was a lot of challenges and trepidation early on in the season about what that would look like. And right now we're in a place with personal protective equipment for our first responders. We have very few first responders that have been affected by COVID at this point that don't affect our operations, which is important. And I believe that directly is related to our community taking this seriously, both COVID and hurricane season.
Absolutely. You mentioned it really has been a double-edged sword this season. People who may be in the city obviously tuning in here tonight to kind of get a sense of what's headed their way. What do you want people to know here? What should they be doing? What should they be looking at in terms of your information in the next few days?
You know, today, tomorrow, even a little bit of Thursday is going to be good for preparations, and that's what should be happening right now. People should be out. They should be gathering their supplies that they need. Everything we're seeing right now is that this can support a shelter in place. However, I mean, we'll be evaluating this minute by minute, as you will, and we'll continue to look at this and make decisions as we have to. So I guess the most important thing is to stay weather aware and to follow us at NOLA Ready here in New Orleans if you're local. And you can text Delta to 888-777 here in New Orleans for real-time updates, and we'll keep you updated with everything we know when we know it.
All right. Well, Colin Arnold, New Orleans EMA Director, we thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure we'll be talking to you here in the days to come. And still to come on tonight's Weather Underground, our coverage of Hurricane Delta continues. Cat 4, can you believe it? Hurricane. This is nearing Cozumel, Cancun, so all of those prime vacation spots. And then we've got the U.S. Gulf Coast on high alert later in the week. Plus, from Hurricane Wilma 15 years ago to Delta now. We explain why this part of the Caribbean is no stranger to rapid intensification. Dr. Knabb, our hurricane expert, is going to break it down for us coming up.
Cameras roll.
This is something nobody can imagine.
Our experts react.
What do you do?
Oh my gosh! Jaw dropping.
Nope, 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 all the way back home.
It doesn't get better than this.
Don't miss all new episodes of Weather Gone Viral, Sunday nights at 9, here on the Weather Channel. Get your daily dose of everything weather.
Wow! Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
Thanks for staying with us here as we follow the very latest on Hurricane Delta tonight. The long lines in Merida, Mexico here for gas, as folks line up to get the supplies that they'll need in advance of the landfall of Hurricane Delta, likely to cause a significant impact here on the Yucatan Peninsula, including in Merida and in Cozumel and in Cancun. You can see that we've got a very intense hurricane right now. It's a Category 4 with 145-mile-per-hour winds. And I think yesterday at this time, it was about half of that. Pressure has really bottomed out, down to about 956 millibars now, west-northwest movement at 17. It's got plenty of warm water that helps fuel the hurricane. It's got low wind shear environment right now. We've got weak steering currents, and so not a lot of dry air that's being pulled into this at all, and so everything is there for the taking, in essence. The strong wind shear is all way up here. I mean, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of miles away from where the hurricane is right now. Wind shear is oftentimes what we're rooting for to tear a hurricane apart, to weaken it. That's not really in the cards at this point. Even as we get into Friday, very weak wind shear is in place. I don't even think it's going to be enough to do much to it. We could get a little bit cooler water up toward maybe the coastline here, but it's still warm enough, we think, to at least maintain its current strength. There's a look at the forecast here, still maintaining strength up to a Category 3 hurricane, maybe right up to landfall here, Alex, which is a very ominous thought here. Another potential major hurricane into Louisiana this season.
Yeah, they're looking at that like, not again. And Delta, the fastest storm to intensify from a tropical depression to a Cat 4 hurricane in modern Atlantic record. So, Dr. Knapp, what is it about this area of the Caribbean that fuels rapid intensification? You said last hour there's something even in the question I just asked you that's kind of the answer.
Yeah, the fuel is in the fuel. I mean, you have this really, really full gas tank in the Northwest Caribbean. It's not just warm waters at the surface, it's warm water to a significant depth. But there are other factors too. You need a lot of different things to come together to create rapidly intensifying hurricanes. First, let's just set the table here. Look at some history. Delta is not the first system to go from a tropical storm to a Cat 4 or 5 in a real big hurry in October or November. We have some notorious names on this list, like Mitch in 1998, Wilma in 2005, Paloma that went northeastward, Keith in 2000. All of these names have been retired. So when you get something rapidly intensifying to Cat 4 or 5 in this part of the world, it's really hard to avoid land impacts, including up in the U.S., like Wilma in 2005, and like we are pretty sure is going to happen with Delta. Now, so what's going on here in the Northwest Caribbean? First, you just look at the sea surface temperatures. The waters are super duper warm, up near 90 degrees. But they are pretty warm in other parts of the basin. But right now, they're warmer than average here this year. But also, if you look across the Atlantic Basin, where are the warm waters here? Well, what we're looking at here is how warm the water is below the surface. And the Northwest Caribbean has what we call ocean heat content galore, right? If the sea surface temperature is being warm as fuel, this is fuel injection. You churn up the ocean, more warm water just comes up from below. But also, weak wind shear is a big part of it. We certainly have that going on right now. And if you look at climatologically, on average, while you have the strong jet stream activity activity in October and November over the Gulf Coast region northward, bringing our fronts through and all that. Weak wind shear over the Northwest Caribbean and over Central America. That's the average conditions, so it leaves things ripe for development. Also, you don't have tropical waves developing out in the east and central Atlantic like you did in the middle of the season that took up like Teddy and Paulette. Take up the tropical waves and they develop farther east. But now this time of year, they come in and they lead to development. Gamma and Delta both formed from tropical waves that were kind of innocuous as they went across the Atlantic, and then they get to this ripe area of the Northwest Caribbean and development we get. But this, Mike, is a little bit unusual to get a hurricane coming toward Louisiana from a Cat 4 or 5 in the Northwest Caribbean in October.
But you know what? It's 2020. Nothing should surprise us anymore. It really shouldn't. 4 million acres that have burned here in California. Some of the biggest fires have been in Northern California. The August fires burned nearly 1 million acres. It's highlighted in green on your map. And so that's there in Northern California outside of Redding, but numerous fires, San Francisco and Fresno. But there's a change in the pattern. That change in the pattern brings in actually a ton of atmospheric moisture. An atmospheric river is going to come in here and hit the places we need it to hit. Washington, Oregon, Northern and Central California. Here's a look at the total rainfall forecast, and it is good. Look at this. Some spots, especially up in Oregon and Washington, 3 to 5 inches could fall our way, but all these places we have wildfires right now. This is well-placed rain. More on our top story, Delta, after this. Right now on Weather Underground, dangerous days ahead in the tropics. Hurricane Delta exploding into an intense Category 4 hurricane today. Sustained winds now 145 miles per hour, expected to strengthen even more. Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, including Cozumel and Cancun, now facing strongest hurricane to strike there in 15 years. We take you there for the latest.
And the U.S. Gulf Coast also on high alert for what could be a disastrous strike later this week. Our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knabb, breaks down the latest scenarios for extreme winds, destructive storm surge, and flooding rainfall. It's all next on a special extended edition of Weather Underground.
Thank you for being with us here tonight on Weather Underground. I'm Mike Bettis.
I'm Alex Wilson. Right now, all eyes on Hurricane Delta, an intense hurricane threatening Mexico and the United States. We got some new video to show you. The hurricane hunters, they're even getting out in the path of Delta. Biloxi, Mississippi, home of Keesler. They're going to move their operations to Joint Base San Antonio in the meantime. So, you know, Mike, we say when the time comes to go and take like the hurricane hunters and say, all right, you know what, might not be a bad idea to get out of here.
You know, it was during Hurricane Sally. They did the same thing, went over to San Antonio just to get out of harm's way, and they can fly their missions from there. Let's take a live look at Grand Cayman here. That's down in the Caribbean. This is actually now going to be well to the east of where the hurricane is, but you can still see very, very breezy here. Beaches look to be in good shape. All the beach furniture and everything is out there. But Delta was relatively weak when it slid just south of the Cayman Islands, but it really exploded, really intensified as it's making its approach now to Mexico. Let's bring in our hurricane expert, former director of the National Hurricane Center, our Dr. Rick Knabb. This thing has got danger written all over it, Dr. Knabb.
Yeah, and at least we had some idea 24 hours ago that it was going to intensify pretty rapidly, but I don't think we were counting on
like this thing's gone ballistic.
Yeah, Cat 4 by now, no, nobody saw that coming. But this is what can happen in the Northwestern Caribbean, even in October. But it really kind of hurts to see this happening so close to land areas, with Cancun and Cozumel just mere hours away from dealing directly with the core, potentially, of a major hurricane. Now, it's small, so maybe the worst of it can avoid the most populated areas if we get lucky, but it's awfully close. And it's moving west-northwest at 17 miles an hour, so time is running out. And because we don't have any indication that it's going to lose its inner eye and maybe go through a replacement cycle, it looks like it's going to continue to strengthen perhaps all the way up until landfall. But we'll have a little bit more of a better idea of that in a few minutes, because the NOAA Hurricane Hunters, this is one of the P3s that goes into the hurricane. They took off from Lakeland a little while ago, and now they're going to come in. Looks like they're going to come in from the northwest and go through the eye. We'll see if the pressure has gone down or if the winds have come up. And that data will be used, of course, by the National Hurricane Center forecasters as they put together their intermediate public advisory that will be coming out. in less than an hour. So far, they're not close enough to this small hurricane to have really strong winds yet. So we'll have to wait and see if those winds come up. The wind field not very big right now, but I don't think it's going to stay that way because at some point that small eye will probably go away. We're going to have a bigger system over the Gulf of Mexico. Last few visible images of the day, you still can't make out an eye on the conventional imagery, and that's been the case for the last few hours with these really small systems, kind of a pinhole kind of eye. You can kind of make out a dimple in there, but you only can really see the overshooting tops as we lose the sunshine of the day. But the aircraft will find the eye, no doubt about it. They are hurricane hunters after all, and we'll get an update from them shortly. Now, it's going to spend a little bit of time over land, it looks like, but it's not going to be a very long time. So maybe it will be a period where it weakens a little bit, but then it will be over the warm waters of the Gulf with weak wind shear and some re-strengthening, maybe to Category 4 is forecast by the Hurricane Center. Now, again, because it'll probably go through some structural changes somewhere along the way because of land interaction, eyewall replacement cycles, maybe eventually the cooler waters over the northern Gulf, we're probably going to have a change in size as well. So while we are forecasting from the Hurricane Center something near the Cat 3-4 threshold as it gets into the northern Gulf, it might be a lot larger than it is now. So maybe not as strong of a northern Gulf Coast landfall as a Yucatan landfall, but it could be a lot larger, which is a bigger storm surge producer, bigger area of wind, longer duration of rain, the big systems, it's all worse. Now, when will the conditions start going downhill? About 3 days from now, maybe a little bit less, when the winds of tropical storm force will start arriving. So I would expect the hurricane and storm surge watches to go up tomorrow for the northern Gulf Coast. And if this increases in size or speeds up, Alex, we could be dealing with those conditions going downhill Friday morning. So we basically have tonight, tomorrow, and Thursday to get ready.
Yeah, time to act is now. I want to get you up to speed on what we know about Hurricane Delta. States of emergency have been issued in Louisiana and in Alabama. Alabama Governor Kay Ivey is ordering a mandatory evacuation of all tourists and visitors in coastal communities. That starts first thing tomorrow. Now in New Orleans, the city says all 99 sewer and drainage pumps are open and ready for potential flooding. Now, Hurricane Delta has made a mess of people's vacation plans. How about Playa del Carmen, Mexico? That's just near Cancun. Well, tourists say the Mexican government told them today that they need to evacuate ahead of Delta's arrival. And we're seeing the impacts this evening across sections of the Yucatan. You can see how close Delta is right now. 5 o'clock advisory, a 145-mile-per-hour Category 4 hurricane. There's our hurricane warning, the area in the purple. So we're looking at that northeast part of the Yucatan Peninsula where we expect the greatest effects, including storm surge of 6 to 9 feet. So that's that water onto normally dry ground. Then we're looking at winds over 40 miles an hour. Our gusts Tuesday night, so tonight into later tomorrow. Wednesday morning, early tomorrow, that's when we anticipate those winds that are gusting over 70 miles an hour. Rainfall to come, likely around 3 to 5 inches in addition to that storm surge. Fairly confined area of the hurricane force wind, so it's not a super large hurricane force wind field. That looks like it could be going right between Cozumel and Cancun. So, Mike, obviously that could mean some of those resorts, some of those more populated areas would be affected.
100%. Alex, thank you for that. So one of the crucial parts of this is what will it be? Where's it going? Dr. Knabb coming back with us now. Dr. Knabb, can you break down for our viewers that are watching right now what's steering this, what's pushing and pulling it and putting it into the Yucatan Peninsula and eventually a place like Louisiana?
Yeah, the steering currents are actually pretty well defined. There's an area of high pressure over the western Atlantic and over Florida into the eastern Gulf. And Hurricane Delta is basically just rounding that ridge. So you put a big H here on the map at all levels. It's really pretty a deep ridge, and that's what's pushing it along. And it will round that ridge, and that's why it's going to turn to the north toward the northern Gulf Coast. And then we're going to have a little bit of a trough over the central U.S. that will eventually bend it to the northeast. So those are the big players, but even though the steering currents are well defined such that we have that overall sense of things pretty well understood, such that we can say high confidence of a significant hurricane hitting the central Gulf Coast, when you start getting into the details, that's where it gets a little bit more difficult and pretty hard to determine what exactly is going to happen with the track. It's such that it's hard to pinpoint who's going to get landfall of the center, who's going to get the strongest winds and the worst storm surge. So you can see that cone is still pretty wide up at the landfall time 3 days from now. Now, let's take a look at some of the model guidance we have for track. Here is the European model ensemble, the collection of track possibilities based on this morning's model run from the European. And now, again, the European model itself is a little farther left than the GFS, for example, and the ensemble of tracks from the Euro is favoring the western part of Louisiana, even extreme southeast Texas among some of the possibilities. And so, when you look at the cone and some of the other models, like the GFS, it's a little farther to the right. And pretty close to the center of the cone. And then you look at the various ensembles from the GFS. They are on both sides of the parent model, with a few of them farther to the right. I will say for you folks in New Orleans, don't be thinking, oh, well, this is going to miss us to the left. The chances are relatively high that you're going to have a center passing to the left of you, which would put you on the stronger side. Stronger wind, more storm surge, and so forth. So a track to the left of New Orleans isn't necessarily all good news. Given all that track intensity and size uncertainty, here are the chances of hurricane force winds, the greatest chances along the Louisiana coast, the central and southwestern part of the coast, but the chances are not so low over in southeast Louisiana. And then tropical storm force winds, New Orleans greater than 50-50 shot, and nearly the entire state of Louisiana has a 50-50 shot. So, Alex, we have a pretty good idea where this is going, but, the details, that is still 3 days out, pretty hard to pinpoint.
Yes, and the Louisiana coast is no stranger to tropical threats this hurricane season. We've been talking about them an awful lot here. Dr. Knabb, we've got to watch the Gulf Coast in particular. We talk about areas, one of those, Louisiana, that's especially susceptible.
Yes, absolutely. And because this is expected to be a large hurricane, not just a pretty strong one, that means a lot of you are going to get the impacts no matter what the details of the track are. You hear me complain about slow-moving systems a lot. Well, I also like to complain about large systems because they tend to be bigger storm surge producers and longer duration of rain and wind. And when you have big upper-level high pressure, that's going to be following this into the Gulf of Mexico, that means any structural changes that happen are going to allow the system to grow. And we think we're going to lose that inner eye wall at some point, and then it won't be a small system anymore. Now, over the southern half of the Gulf of Mexico, the waters are still warm, very warm, warmer than average, and so even if a little bit of land interaction or the deterioration of that small inner eye were to cause a structural change and a little bit of weakening, the waters are warm enough to support re-strengthening as it perhaps gets to be a larger system. And even though the waters are cooler than average over the northern Gulf because of the fronts that we've had so far, the waters are still warm. It's still well into the 80s. So the situation is such that the ocean temperatures and the atmosphere are such that it's conditions that will support a major hurricane, maybe just not a rapidly intensifying hurricane up to the time of landfall. So it will probably, given this kind of scenario with slightly cooler waters in the northern Gulf and a little bit of increase of wind shear right before landfall and some internal structural changes, probably what's going to happen is it's peaking tonight into tomorrow. A little bit of land interaction. Maybe we change the structure such that it's no longer a small hurricane but a larger one. And then it peaks out, and then it weakens, but just not a lot. And it will be a larger hurricane as it goes north. And so these cooler waters, Alex, don't make me feel a whole lot better about the situation, because all it means is it'll weaken a little bit, but larger systems weaken slowly, and larger systems are just worse overall in so many ways.
Yeah, a lot of real estate. So even a weaker but larger system, I don't want you to, think this means it's better. Biloxi, one of the spots that, of course, we're going to be watching here closely in the next few days. Rain, obviously, will be a concern. You can see plenty of people out there on the roads. Last hour, though, man, it was packed there in Biloxi. You're kind of on the fringe of the cone right now, but we're going to be watching you guys closely for effects. Could find yourself once again getting ready. Obviously, where you are now, you need to be watching this, and I would just say be prepared if you're near the area. Flash flooding will be an absolute possibility in Biloxi. It's not just Biloxi, but areas throughout a lot of Louisiana that could see flash flooding Thursday and into early Friday. So those are the areas that we will be watching for that. Here's the European model. The rainfall footprint greatest the farther west you go. So we're talking eastern Texas, western and central portions of Louisiana for the heaviest rainfall. The GFS footprint of the heaviest rain a little farther to the east. So now we'll be watching portions of, say, south central Louisiana into western parts of Mississippi, and then getting up into parts of western Tennessee as well. So we could be looking at some pretty high totals. The good news is that this storm is moving, so we're not looking at it sitting over an area and just continuing to rain out. With that said, though, these areas are really saturated. We've seen a lot of rain so far this year. Jackson and Birmingham over 19.5 inches above average for the year in both areas. In fact, we're almost 20 inches above average there in Birmingham. New Orleans, Nashville, both over a half foot above average. The only spot we're below average here on this chart is Lake Charles. This is a place, though, they're still cleaning up from Laura. They don't want to see big effects out of this one. New Orleans, best chance of rain coming to your area on Friday. So that's when we've got the gusty winds, also the thunderstorms likely. In Lake Charles, Thursday night into Friday, we start with the scattered thunderstorms Thursday and Thursday night. Best chance of wind, thunderstorms. Most coverage will be on Friday to end your week. That's going to keep temperatures in check. If you do need to think about inland flooding, if you're in one of those areas that's going to get some heavy rainfall totals, remember things like don't drive into water-covered roadways, don't drive around any barricades, don't walk, play, bike, get in those floodwaters. They are filthy. And evacuate according to instructions from officials. If flooding traps you in your home, call 911. Don't get in your car and try to get out, and do not touch wet electrical equipment. Mike, all important stuff to remember when we talk about the risk of flooding.
And we're going to break down a lot more for you tonight on Hurricane Delta. Full coverage when we come back here continues as we track this serious hurricane bearing down on Cozumel and Cancun, Mexico. The U.S. Gulf Coast next in line, and high alert for a potentially destructive strike by Friday. And don't forget, you can get even more coverage of Delta and everything else weather on social media. If you're away from your TV, a great resource for you is Pattern. You can find it on Twitter, TikTok. You can find it on Facebook and Instagram. We're back after this.
Unbelievable. This is real.
When your cameras roll, our experts react.
Jaw-dropping.
Weather Gone Viral, Sunday nights at 9, here on the Weather Channel.
Stay tuned for your Local on the 8s, brought to you by Prevagen, the #1 pharmacist-recommended memory support brand.
Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we.
From this point forward, conditions will continue to deteriorate.
Don't let COVID-19 take your eye off the tropics. This year's threat is more complex and dangerous than ever before.
Remain vigilant, pay close attention to the Weather Channel.
No one can cover this historic hurricane season better than the Weather Channel. Get the information you need to stay safe every day. Storm safety in a pandemic, all season long, right here on the Weather Channel.
And we yet again have another hurricane that we're following for you tonight, and this one looks to be a bad one. This is a Category 4. It's a delta. It has 145-mile-per-hour winds moving west-northwest at 17 miles per hour. We are anticipating a new update from the Hurricane Center in roughly 35 to 40 minutes. We'll get an updated position, potentially an updated wind speed as well. But you can see where it's headed, west-northwest, and that puts right here the tip of the Yucatan Peninsula at great risk. A place that a lot of Americans are familiar with, Cancun. Big tourist destination. A lot of people vacation there. Cozumel, it's the island that sits right off the mainland there. Big destination for scuba diving and snorkeling. They're just like world class there, folks, and this is bad news. Coming into the Gulf of Mexico after it hits Mexico, still a major hurricane, maybe a major hurricane all the way up into landfall. Most likely Louisiana if you follow the center track, but it could be outside of that even, could be Texas, maybe over toward say Mississippi as well. So all eyes right now are on the northern Gulf Coast. You need to be making preparations right now. You've got some time still. You've got this evening, you've got tomorrow, you might have even Thursday to make your preps. We don't anticipate tropical storm force winds until sometime Friday morning, and then sometime on Friday making a landfall with very intense winds thereafter. And we expect the wind field to expand as well. Notice here by a Thursday, winds are starting to ramp up. Thursday overnight out of the east or maybe slightly southeast. 30 to 35 miles per hour in New Orleans, and in Houma, Lake Charles, 30 to 35. Watch the intensity come in here. And this is, again, a look at where the eye could potentially come in. That might be, very near, Lake Charles sitting right up here, maybe very close to where Laura made landfall even. The wind's really cranking, right front quadrant here. That's where you're likely to get some of your highest winds and your strongest surge. The highest wind will be in the core, right in here, but your storm surge will be mostly on the right side. You'll get an offshore wind flow on the back side of the system. It'll continue to move inland here. Still a very breezy day on Saturday. Wind coming out of the west, though. But the storm's moving. A lot of these storms have been moving very, very slowly and almost crawling once they've made landfall, producing huge amounts of rain. At this point, we don't anticipate that. We expect it to continue to move inland, but there are some spots here where 5 to 8 inches of flooding rain is possible, going up the mouth of the Mississippi, then up into, say, Arkansas, and then maybe even northern Mississippi here. 3 to 5 inches of rain could be coming our way here. So, yes, the wind will be there, the surge will be there, and even the flooding rain, but maybe not as intense as previous storms, Alex. So, in some regard, that's the one maybe small bit of good news with Delta.
Yeah, perhaps. And as the Yucatan, places like Cancun get prepared, so do the people that live there. They're bracing for what could be actually their strongest tropical strike in more than a decade. These were the long lines at the gas stations to show for everybody trying to get ready, right? Now, it's not the longest time between tropical strikes, because remember, we just had Tropical Storm Gamma made landfall in Tulum. That was October 3rd. 70-mile-per-hour winds, pressure 980 millibars. But we went from those tropical storm watches and warnings for Gamma to the hurricane warnings because of Delta. Let's take a peek at what Gamma did across sections of Mexico. We look at Cozumel, and here you can see, looks like might be the Secrets Resort, and they've kind of got these little areas, these I don't even know what you'd call them. Clearly, I don't go to fancy enough resorts, but you get to sit on them, you eat dinner, it's like super romantic. They weren't faring so well thanks to the rough surf. And then you get a sense of what it was like. You get one of these really beautiful balcony views from high up, and you don't really see much of anything. Everything kind of looks gray because the sea, the surf is rough, it's raining, it's windy. Here's a look at some of the tree damage that we saw in the area, courtesy of the winds of Gamma. So you can see plenty of tree debris out there on the streets. We take a peek at what else now we'll be bracing for. I showed you the back-to-back warnings. This, though, could be the strongest strike in some time. We look back in recent history. We got to go way back to 2005. We all remember Wilma, of course, from the epic 2005 season. Major hurricane as it made its way over the Yucatan. Gilbert of 1988. That one was a Cat 5 as it made its way into the Yucatan. And then we had two unnamed storms, 1903 and 1909. So, Mike, again, no stranger to storms, but it's been a while since we've seen something as powerful as this.
Is one that's got our attention. It should have yours as well. So we're going to cover a lot more. Hurricane Hunter mission is ongoing right now. When we come back, we're going to show you what those hurricane hunters are finding as Delta roars toward the Yucatan Peninsula and eventually the U.S. Gulf Coast. The latest information on what they're finding. We've got a NOAA plane that's about to go right across the center of the hurricane. Dr. Nab will analyze what they're finding next.
You're watching America's most trusted TV news network.
We've got a severe weather threat.
Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
The Weather Channel. Get your daily dose of everything weather on Quibi. From the viral
Now to the weather video that we cannot stop watching.
to the vital
Get ready because we are in for another wet week.
and all the wonderful weather in between.
Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
Look at this. Rough ocean thanks to Category 4 Hurricane Delta. And we saw that in some big waves crashing there along the wall in Grand Cayman. And Grand Cayman, Mike, as we've been pointing out, not exactly close to where the storm is.
No, you know, when it was a tropical storm, it was kind of south of the Cayman Islands. There wasn't much to it. It's a small hurricane. Just really blossomed once it got west of the islands. But we're still seeing the big waves churned up there.
Yeah, kind of blossoming like when you go from, you know, your happy preteen years to just being a terror as a teenager or going from one to the terrible twos, right? That's what we've seen with this storm within the last 24 hours.
That's one way of putting it.
Yeah.
But I get your point. Yeah, this thing has gone berserk today, that's for sure. Alex Wilson, Mike Bettis with you. Special extended coverage for you. We'll be with you till 9 o'clock. We'll have live coverage till midnight tonight to keep you updated on Hurricane Delta. The hurricane hunters are out there right now, keeping us informed of what's happening. So we've got an ongoing upper-level flight. We've got a P3 that's en route. They've just basically gotten there now. And then tomorrow we'll have another low-level NOAA flight. Then we'll have constant Air Force flights as well. So let's show you the flight that most recently took off from Lakeland. They're about to make a turn and cut through the center of the hurricane. Let's get some more details with our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Nab. These missions so critical, Dr. Nab, the low-level flights that give us the real-time data of what the hurricane is doing, then these upper-level missions that fly around the extremities of the hurricane that allow us to forecast its future path.
Yeah, now the NOAA plane that's going into the center of Hurricane Delta right now is at about 10,000 feet. Now, when they fly into full-blown hurricanes, they don't fly as low as they would for a tropical storm, and certainly not as low as they would for an INVEST mission for safety reasons. But at 10,000 feet, they can get a pretty good idea of what's going on and reduce that data down to the surface. They're just now getting into the tropical storm force winds, and I'll show you where that is in just a little bit. We're going to get a new advisory from the Hurricane Center within the half hour with the benefit of that Hurricane Hunter data as they go through. What the specialist is doing at the Hurricane Center right now is looking through the aircraft data, and then he's going to get the public advisory mostly written, and then look at the aircraft data one more time, finalize the numbers, and send out the advisory. It's one of the more fast-paced 30 minutes that you have as a hurricane specialist during the next 30 minutes from now, with aircraft data coming in before advisory time. So you can see how it's just now getting to where it's detecting winds of tropical storm force as it comes in from the northwest, but you can see it's not all that far from the center. This is not a large system right now. It's very compact, and we'll have to see how wide the eye is on this penetration of the storm, because it was only about 5 miles across during the previous aircraft mission. These small systems can go up and down in a hurry. This one has done nothing but go up for the last 24 hours, and we don't yet have any indication that that small eye is about to fall apart, as they sometimes do with an eyeball replacement cycle. If this small eye holds together, it could continue to strengthen all the way up to landfall in northeast Yucatan tomorrow morning, and that's obviously bad news. Now, if it stays small, maybe we limit the area of damage and can get that to be in the less populated areas if at all possible. The last few visible images of the day on the high-res GOES imagery, you don't make out the eye. You just see the bubbling of the convection. It's such a small system that we can't make out the eye. You see a little dimple on the infrared there once in a while, but oh my gosh, these cloud tops are so tall, so cold, just extremely vigorous convection, and with the small size of the system going over land, there will be some weakening, but eventually there will be a structural change, we think, and it'll become a larger system. Then we've got a large Cat 3 or 4 going northward in the Gulf of Mexico, and when you look at how large the system is forecast to be by the European model, this is not good news, Alex, because the larger systems, bigger storm surge producers, bigger rainmakers, more wind for more people.
Yeah. So what should you be doing now? Well, preparation always key. Preparation allows you to survive, even thrive during the storm. So set yourself up for success and prepare now. Things to do include, probably the most important, leave when you're instructed to do so. So if your authorities tell you it's time to go, it's time to go. Determine that safe evacuation route. Decide where you're going to be staying. Maybe designate somebody right now. Hey, can I come stay with you? Should I have to evacuate? Always good to do. Now, no excuses. Take your pets with you. Take all necessary supplies they're going to need. They're going to need a collar, their name tag, the little vaccination charms, leash, their paperwork, food and water. Shut off your home utilities, unplug appliances, take your vehicle and house keys with you, and of course pack the essentials. We talk about the food, the water, but think about things that are going to make it a little bit more comfortable for you. The things that you're going to need to keep power, whether they're phone chargers or even solar chargers, games, toys for the kids, and of course all that food and water you'll need. Prescription medication as well. We're back after this.
What was unbelievable? This is real.
When your cameras roll, our experts react.
Jaw-dropping.
Weather Gone Viral, Sunday nights at 9, here on the Weather Channel.
I do also want to emphasize that no one thus right now, this far out in particular, should be focused on the center line of the track. That storm is coming to Louisiana. Somewhere on our coast, it'll make landfall, and so don't get too focused on the center line.
That is Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards. We have been hearing from him quite a bit this hurricane season, as Louisiana time and time again has found themselves in the thunderstorms blowing up near the center. We've got a very small but potent area of winds at the center. So the hurricane force winds don't extend that far out, but where we get them, and we could be getting them in some populated areas there in the Yucatan, could see significant damage. Hurricane warnings posted. That's the areas in that purple color that you're seeing. Of course, no lack in warmth in the ocean. And once this gets into the Gulf, we'll have warm water, at least in the southern part. Gets a little cooler as we head up closer to the Gulf Coast. So Dr. Knapp, we talk about possible weakening, but at the same time, we could be looking at a larger system, and where this goes could mean big storm surge issues for plenty of locations.
I don't think it's going to weaken as much as we would like, especially when it becomes a larger system over the central Gulf. Larger systems weaken more slowly, and it's going to be moving along, so it's not going to have a whole lot of time over cooler water before getting to the northern Gulf Coast. So the forward speed of the track will probably help it maintain a lot of its strength. And 125-mile-an-hour hurricane, strong Cat 3, that could be pretty large. That's a pretty big deal for the northern Gulf Coast. Now, let's take a look at some of the models and how we're using that to forecast the track. And you'll see how large the system gets in the European model here. This is by Thursday evening. And then look at that. Oh, that left-hand bend gets so dangerously close to southeast Texas. We could have some storm surge issues even in the Galveston area, even if you don't get landfall of the center. But this large system coming ashore in the Lake Charles area, if this exact European model is correct, I hate to have to say that to folks who are recovering from Laura, but we got to get ready for that possibility. And if you look at the European model ensembles, alternative track scenarios, some are on the left, some are on the right of that main European model run, but they're all kind of packed in close to southwestern Louisiana, maybe southeast Texas, whereas the GFS, the main model, again, showing a large system. So even if you don't get the exact center, you're going to get the system in much of Louisiana one way or another. It's a little farther to the right than the European model was, and I think it's a little bit larger of a system in the GFS. Then you look at some of the track representations of the GFS that goes pretty much right down the middle of the cone, but then you look at some of its ensembles. They are spread out all over Louisiana, both edges of the cone and down the middle as well. So when you look at all of that, we cannot pinpoint who's going to get the hurricane force winds. It's possible in Lake Charles. It's possible in New Orleans. So, Alex, everybody in the cone has got to prepare. And, Mike, I know New Orleans has caught a break a few times this year, but I can't guarantee that this is going to be another one like that.
So many close calls this year, Dr. Knabb. New Orleans has actually been in the cone more times than any other city in America this season. 6 different times now. 5 for Houston, 3 for Miami, 2 New York, 1 for Charleston. And so we've done this over and over and over again. 5 landfalls here in the northern Gulf Coast, from Cristobal to Laura, Marco, Sally, Beta, and now we could have a direct hit from Delta. Now, the good news is we've just been mostly glancing blows in New Orleans. The most rain we picked up was just about 2.5 inches from Cristobal. Haven't even had tropical storm force wind gusts. So, again, maybe a dress rehearsal for what's to come, but you always need to be prepared, and Delta certainly means business. Hurricane Katrina in 2005, we know it shined a light on how devastating a tropical system can be for New Orleans. Mark Elliott has a look at the levee system. Is it good enough?
New Orleans sits close to the hurricane-prone Gulf, surrounded by water and dissected by canals. And worse, much of the city sits below sea level. New Orleans is built in a bowl. Once water comes into the city, it has nowhere to go, trapping residents and making evacuation almost impossible. That can lead to a large loss of life. The Army Corps of Engineers has implemented a risk reduction system, but it is not a risk elimination system. During Katrina, storm surge rushed into the city when flood walls failed, drowning the lower 9th Ward with water up to roofs. Today, it would be different. These walls should stand, but a strong hurricane coming at just the wrong angle can produce storm surge even higher than these massive walls. Water would pour into the city even without a levee failure, and the calculation is a wrong Category 2 hurricane could be enough to do it. As neighborhoods like the lower 9th Ward rebuild behind the flood walls, there's a new and surprising worry. Officials' biggest concern is complacency. The city hasn't seen a large storm since Katrina, and they are worried people will find reasons not to listen to evacuation orders. Residents need to evacuate, but evacuating isn't easy in the Big Easy. One estimate is that it could take 44 hours to get everybody out of New Orleans and to clear the roads.
It was unbelievable. This is real.
When your cameras roll,
this is something nobody can imagine.
Our experts react.
What do you do?
Oh my gosh.
Jaw-dropping.
Nope, 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 all the way back home.
It doesn't get better than this.
Don't miss all new episodes of Weather Gone Viral, Sunday nights at 9, here on the Weather Channel. Get your daily dose of everything weather.
Wow! Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
Well, long lines here for gas and other supplies in Merida, Mexico, and the Yucatan Peninsula. This is over on the west side. It's about a 3-hour drive west of Cancun, but no one taking any chances. They just got a glancing blow from Gamma, and now they potentially could have to deal with Delta. Delta, completely different animal, too. We've got a Category 4 hurricane on our hands right now, likely to intensify even more. Could be on the precipice of a Category 5, right up to a landfall in Mexico. So pressure right now, 956 millibars, west-northwest movement at 17 miles per hour. We're anticipating a new update from the Hurricane Center any minute now and give us a new position, potentially a new intensity, and potentially a new forward speed as well. But we've just got a lot of fuel out there. We've got a lot of warm water. Temperatures, sea surface temperatures close to about 90 degrees here. Light winds aloft supporting strengthening. We have wind shear that's well displaced from the hurricane, so that's not tearing the thing apart at all. We've got some upper level ridging taking place, no dry air being pulled into the system. So at this point, it's got everything going for it, is what I'm trying to say. Even as we go into Friday, 3 days from now, as we're getting close to a landfall, the wind shear is still not really affecting it in any significant way at all. So that's not something that's going to, in essence, keep it from intensifying or at least maintaining itself. Cooler coastal waters, a little bit less favorable for strengthening, but still warm enough. Even these temperatures here in the yellows and oranges are 80 degrees plus, so it's still warm enough, maybe not as warm as it is in the Caribbean. But look at the forecast here. Friday morning, 130 mile per hour, high-end Category 3, may maintain Category 3 status all the way through a landfall in Louisiana. Anticipating tropical storm force winds to begin maybe as early as Friday, mid-morning here. A landfall happening on Friday, storm coming inland then after that with the winds picking up each and every step of the way here. But a really devastating blow, we think, is in the cards for Mexico as well as the United States. Alex, another late season storm that really has some teeth to it.
Right, and Delta is actually the fastest storm to intensify from a tropical depression to Category 4 hurricane in modern Atlantic records. So that's saying something. And Dr. Knabb, there seems to be something about this area of the Caribbean that really helps these storms rapidly intensify.
Yeah, and there are a lot of factors. There's abundant fuel with the warm waters, there's weak wind shear, and there's also the fact that the tropical waves that develop out in the tropical Atlantic in the peak of the season, they don't develop out there, and then they kind of wait. They come innocently along, and they blow up over the Western Caribbean on our doorstep. So let's take a look at a little bit of the history during the active era since 1995, where we've had rapid intensification to Cat 4 or 5 over the Northwest Caribbean late in the hurricane season. You see some very notorious names on here, like Mitch in 1998, like Roxanne in 1995, Keith in 2000, Wilma in 2005, even Paloma 2008 that went northeastward. All of these names have been retired. They were all really bad, even if they didn't make landfall at Cat 4 or 5. Former Cat 4s and 5s are usually really bad news, including Cat 3 landfall Wilma in southern Florida. Now, of course, Delta is going to be headed this direction, which will be a little bit unusual compared to the tracks of these past systems. But in any event, there's something about the Northwest Caribbean. Now, part of it is warm sea surface temperatures. We talk about that all the time. Warm waters fuel the hurricanes. And not only do we have water temperatures at the surface near 90 degrees, they're warmer than average for this time of year. But it's not just what's going on at the surface. You look down beneath across the entire Atlantic basin, this is the area where you have warm water, not just at the surface, but to a significant depth. Not as much in the Gulf, not as much out in the deep tropical Atlantic, but here in the Northwest Caribbean. That's where the waters are really warm down below. And also, this time of year, Mike, we tend to have weak wind shear. That is also what is fueling Delta's ability to blossom like it has.
It's just exceeded all expectations. Dr. Knabb, thank you. And we'll get back to the tropics here in just a second. We'll bring you that latest on the new advisory second it comes in here. But want to get you what's happening in the West. So we got now 50% containment on one of California's big wildfires, the Glass Fire. Oh, this is one burning in Northern California in wine country, and one that's just adding to the acreage burned here across the state. Over 4 million acres has been consumed here, a lot of that in Central and in Northern California, where the fires in large part have kind of avoided Southern California, but the Santa Ana season now kicking in, and so a lot of times the wind-fueled fires here really start to exacerbate in Southern California. The August fire is the biggest fire in California history. It's burned close to 1 million acres, that outside of Redding. We've got some good news coming your way. We've got a big change in the pattern here. We've got a big atmospheric river that's likely to hit us here in Washington, Oregon, Northern and Central California. It's exactly where we need the rain, too. So this is really well placed. It likely begins sometime on Friday. We could get 3 different rounds, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, all falling in the locations exactly where the fires are. Stick with us, more on Hurricane Delta right after this short break. 5 miles per hour expected to strengthen even more. Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, including Cozumel and Cancun, facing its strongest hurricane in 15 years. We take you there for the latest.
And the U.S. Gulf Coast is also on high alert for what could be a disastrous strike later this week. Our hurricane expert, Dr. Nav, is here to break down the latest scenarios for extreme winds, destructive storm surge, and flooding rainfall. That's all next on a special extended edition of Weather Underground.
Thanks for being with us for an extra hour tonight on Weather Underground. I'm Mike Bettis.
I'm Alex Wilson. Right now, all eyes on Hurricane Delta, an intense hurricane that's threatening Mexico and the United States. New video of the hurricane hunters. Even they're evacuating ahead of Delta. They're actually going to move their operations from Biloxi, Mississippi at Keesler to Joint Base San Antonio. Mike.
I want to show you what the conditions looking like right now in the Caribbean. The island of Grand Cayman, the sun is set now, just a little breezy. The hurricane has moved well to the west of the Caymans. Boy, we got lucky there, as it was just a small storm and a weak storm when it blossomed just south of there, but then it turned into a completely different animal once it really started to take shape. Our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knabb, is with us. Dr. Knabb, the new 8 o'clock advisory just came in. Not a lot of changes here. What do you see happening between maybe now and a potential landfall in Mexico here?
Yeah, and that's several hours away, be tomorrow morning. I think we could see some more strengthening, although the first pass of the aircraft, the NOAA plane through Hurricane Delta within the last hour, did not provide any wind data that were greater than 145 miles an hour, but they're in the middle of their mission, and they got to come around and go northeast to southwest. So one thing, Mike, that we'll see within the time where it is now and making landfall is more data from the hurricane hunters. And on this current mission, we only have preliminary data. We've only gotten one pass through, and they haven't gone through was probably the strongest part. So for the moment, the Hurricane Center is left all alone. Max winds at 145 miles an hour, pressure 956. West-northwest of 17, all the numbers that were the same as at 5 p.m. But the longer this mission goes on, the more they might be able to find some changes going on. But it's closing in on Cozumel and Cancun. The hours are getting shorter and fewer to get ready, and where you could get the direct impact from what could be a Cat 4 and hopefully not a Cat 5. There's still the possibility in the last several hours of it making a little bit more of a strengthening trend before coming on shore. So there's that path of the NOAA plane. Again, they went through what might be the weaker side of the storm, but maybe when they go to the northeast side, they'll find a fascinating tapestry of shades and striations going on in there, but you don't really see a bona fide eye. But the hurricane hunters are still finding the eye. It's just that it's so small, it doesn't show itself clearly on this infrared imagery. But it does have an eye. And the small system, when it interacts with the relatively flat terrain of northeastern Yucatan, that will probably cause some weakening, but it's going to be short-lived. It's moving along at a pretty good pace. It'll be just a few short hours over land, and then it probably, after a little bit of weakening, probably re-strengthens over the southern and central Gulf of Mexico. Now, somewhere along the line, we're probably going to lose that small eye, and it goes through some sort of structural change, eyeball replacement cycle, and then we have a larger eye. And then that becomes its new structure as probably a larger system, as it is still a major hurricane approaching the northern Gulf Coast. So we could have something like a large Cat 3 coming ashore or threatening the Louisiana coastline or southeast Texas or Mississippi. And even though it won't be as strong as the Yucatan landfall, it could be larger and still very strong. The weather will start going downhill before landfall late on Friday, and the expectation is that winds of tropical storm force start showing up daytime Friday. But if this were to speed up a little bit or the wind field expands a little bit, those winds could arrive a little sooner, perhaps Friday morning. So I would be thinking, Alex, to get to bed Thursday night in your safe place, already evacuated with your supplies and ready to deal with whatever Friday brings.
Yeah, I can guarantee you'll sleep better too, because you won't be worrying about what needs to be done. So get it all done here. You got 2 days, 48 hours left. Here's what we know right now about Hurricane Delta. States of emergency, they've been issued in Louisiana and in Alabama. Alabama Governor Kay Ivey is ordering a mandatory evacuation of all tourists and visitors in coastal communities. That starts first thing tomorrow. Now in New Orleans, the city says all 90 I-99 sewer and drainage pumps, they're open. They're ready for potential flooding. Now, more immediately, Delta is throwing really a kink into things for people who had vacation plans. This is Playa del Carmen, Mexico, just near Cancun, where tourists say the Mexican government actually told them today that they need to evacuate ahead of Delta's arrival. Running out of time there because we're bracing for the effects starting tonight, but really into tomorrow morning across portions of the Yucatan. 145-mile-per-hour Category 4 hurricane currently with Delta. We have hurricane warnings posted across really the tip of the Yucatan Peninsula, but this includes Cancun. This includes Cozumel, and an update to the surge. Surge forecast greatest on those north-facing shores along the Yucatan. 9 to 13 feet of surge now in that forecast. 6 to 9 feet for Cancun and for Cozumel down towards the Tulum area. So we've got those counterclockwise winds. So that northerly push, that onshore push, will be greatest on those north-facing beaches. Tuesday night, so tonight into Wednesday afternoon, that's when we've got the 40-plus mile-per-hour gusts in Cancun. 70-plus mile-per-hour gusts Wednesday morning. So tomorrow, Mike, these areas really in the thick of things. One positive is with this storm moving, we're going to see heavy rainfall, but 3 to 5 inches, not nearly as bad as what we could be looking at if the storm was moving much slowly or much slower or not at all.
Maybe one small silver lining there. Alex, thank you for that. Let's bring back in our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knabb. Talk a little bit more about what's pushing and pulling and steering this. Twofold question for you here, Dr. Knabb. Is there a possibility that Mexico could be missed? And if that were the case, what would that mean for its future track in the United States?
Well, it's possible, but the chances are going down really quickly, and we think we're going to have a landfall in northeastern Yucatan. Now, if it were to just barely clip Yucatan and maybe outside chance miss, that would be a little bit of bad news for places farther north because that little bit of land interaction could cause a little bit of weakening. But I think either way, Mike, we're going to have a Cat 3 or 4 over the Gulf of Mexico. And I don't think we want to wish this going ashore in Yucatan to give us a little bit of a blip in the intensity. But I think we're going to have landfall in Yucatan. I think we're going to have a Cat 3 or 4 over the Gulf, and it's going to be a large one.
How locked in is the steering pattern here, Dr. Knabb? How confident are you in this forecast track?
Well, it depends on how detailed we want to talk. Very confident with very well-defined steering currents that this is coming ashore in the north central Gulf Coast of the U.S. Take that to the bank. But within that, there are a lot of details about just exactly how fast this turn to the right is and how sharp it is. That could make all the difference for places like southeast Texas, southwest Louisiana versus southeast Louisiana, Mississippi. But this will probably be such a large system that no matter the details of the track, a lot of you are going to get water and wind impacts at the coast and inland because we're going to have a large, maybe Cat 3 approaching the northern Gulf Coast here on Friday in the afternoon into the evening hours, and weather will be going downhill Thursday night into Friday daytime because this will be a large system. You're going to get the northern side of the circulation before you get the center. Watch the track and the size of the European model. Look how far to the left it bends. People in Houston and Galveston were going, ooh, this is getting a little too close for comfort. You could have some storm surge effects, maybe some tropical storm conditions, even if this exact track holds up. But southeast Texas, like Beaumont, Port Arthur, Orange, you could end up, if this stays farther left, getting the core of this. It isn't necessarily going to behave itself and stay within the middle of this cone. But in any event, European has a large, potent system going into southwestern Louisiana. That's the exact parent model track. But if you look at the ensembles, some of them are left of that going into southeast Texas. Some of them are right of that going into central Louisiana. That's just the European collection of possibilities. The GFS parent model, again, that bend to the left, a growing in size hurricane becomes a large and major hurricane, and then it bends a little bit more to the right. And this run comes ashore in the central part of the Louisiana coastline. But again, as a large system, that would put New Orleans on the strong side, the wet side, the onshore flow side. So even if it doesn't go right over you, that's not necessarily good news. Now, the GFS currently is down the middle of the cone, but you look at its ensembles, its alternative track scenarios. Some are to the left, some are to the right. So, all kinds of possibilities throughout the cone and maybe even a little bit outside the cone. So given all those uncertainties, New Orleans, you have a chance of hurricane force winds. You do in Southeast Texas, Lake Charles. Unfortunately, I wish I could tell you you're off the hook on this one because you're recovering from Laura, but you've got the possibility of getting the direct hit from a major hurricane here. And look at, Alex, how many people have a greater than 50-50 shot in their town of getting tropical storm force winds. So we've got storm surge, we've got wind, we got rainfall at the coast and inland to deal with what's probably going to be a large major hurricane in just a little more than 2 days.
Right. And, we talk about the surge. The Louisiana coast is no stranger to tropical actions or surge this season. You're looking at video from back in late August, this Lafourche Parish in Louisiana, as water came across the road thanks to Hurricane Laura's surge. Now we're looking at surge from this storm. So, Dr. Knabb, we look at the Gulf Coast, extremely vulnerable, and once again, we're looking at Louisiana, knowing there are some areas that have already been hit hard with surge and could be looking at that once again. Yeah, and back in the day, we would almost always think of how much surge is going to be dependent on what the intensity is, and that certainly has an impact. But we've got to think about what the size of this is going to be. Remember, former Cat 4s and 5s like Ike and Katrina and Rita and Opal, these were all big storm surge events for the Gulf of Mexico at landfall. And we got weak wind shear, allowing this system to blossom and maintain its strength. And you've got warmer than average waters in the Northwest Caribbean and the southern half of the Gulf. Yes, there are cooler than average waters up in the northern Gulf, but those waters are still above 80 degrees. So these waters are warm enough to support a major hurricane, especially when it's moving relatively quickly. It's not stalling or limping along like Sally was. So what that means is probably this doesn't support a scenario with increasing wind shear at the end, too, of a hurricane that's rapidly intensifying all the way up to the time of landfall in the northern Gulf Coast. But you don't have a situation that allows for quick weakening either. And especially because it's going to be larger over the Gulf than it is now, it's going to be harder for a large system to weaken very quickly. So, yes, it will probably be on a weakening trend, but not as fast as we would like, and not fast enough to keep it from being a large, potentially, say, a Category 3 hurricane coming ashore. And that is all bad. Larger is always worse than small when it comes to impacts, because bigger systems are better at producing storm surge. They are better at holding on to their intensity despite cooler waters. They have a longer duration of wind, and they have a longer duration of rainfall. So even if the hurricane is moving along, it can still be a flood producer along this track because it will be relatively large. And if you, again, look at not just the intensity, but look at the size. You put a hurricane in the western Gulf and northwestern Gulf like this, you're going to have a tremendous amount of onshore push into a part of the coastline that is extremely vulnerable to storm surge. This will be another storm surge event for southeast Louisiana, even along a track that is as far west to southwest Louisiana as the European model is. But the GFS, it's a little farther to the right. And Alex, if I was in New Orleans, I'd be thinking to myself, something coming ashore a little bit to my west puts me on the strong side and the onshore flow side, and we can't count on wind shear to weaken this in time. I think this is going to be a pretty big hit from a big hurricane. Yeah, one to watch for sure as we make our way closer to the end of the week. And a lot of people need to watch. Another spot, Biloxi, Mississippi. You need to keep an eye on this storm. Could we see that track shift? Absolutely. Would you be on that eastern fringe? Yes. And could you see some rainfall out of this one? Yeah, that's also a threat. So the rain potential is going to be there for a lot of areas. Could be looking at some heavy totals. As we talked about, with portions of the Yucatan Peninsula, one of the pieces of good news with this is that it's moving. So it doesn't look like we're going to be looking at a storm that's parking over this part of the country, just bringing days and days of rainfall. We look at your flash flooding potential Thursday and into early Friday. So we've got portions of a lot of the southern half of Louisiana that we've got to watch, southern portions of Mississippi. So that's why we are looking at you, Biloxi, this evening. European model has the heaviest footprint of rain a little farther to the west than the GFS does. We look at the GFS, and it's more right through the middle of Louisiana and into western parts of the state of Mississippi. Again, 3 to 5 plus inches possible. We talk about how much rain we've already seen this year. Jackson, Mississippi, Birmingham, Alabama, both over 19, nearly 20 inches above average for the year when it comes to rainfall, over a half foot above average in New Orleans, in Nashville, below average in Lake Charles, but we're still cleaning up from Laura, so we'd like to keep the worst of this one away. New Orleans, your best chance of rain, a real soaker coming your way on Friday along with the gusty winds. And then, Mike, we look at Lake Charles, also looking at the best chances of rain and wind coming your way on Friday.
Alex, thanks so much for that update. And still to come on Weather Underground, more coverage of Hurricane Delta. We've got a monster storm on our hands here, bearing down on Cozumel and Cancun, the U.S. Gulf Coast next, and on high alert for a destructive strike later in the week. Don't forget, if you're away from your TV, you can always check us out on social media. Everything you need to know on Pattern on every social media platform out there.
When your cameras roll, our experts react.
Jaw-dropping.
Weather Gone Viral, Sunday nights at 9, here on the Weather Channel.
Stay tuned for your Local on the 8s, brought to you by Prevagen, the #1 pharmacist-recommended memory support brand.
Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we.
From this point forward, conditions will continue to deteriorate.
Don't let COVID-19 take your eye off the tropics. This year's threat is more complex and dangerous than ever before.
Remain vigilant, pay close attention to the Weather Channel.
No one can cover this historic hurricane season better than the Weather Channel. Get the information you need to stay safe every day. Storm safety in a pandemic, all season long, right here on the Weather Channel.
All right, so bringing the very latest on Hurricane Delta tonight, a Category 4 hurricane taking aim at the Yucatan Peninsula here, spinning down here in the Caribbean, but we do think this poses a very significant risk to the U.S. Gulf Coast. The 8 o'clock advisory from the Hurricane Center, 145-mile-per-hour winds, 956 millibars of pressure, west-northwest movement at 17. None of that's changed over the last several hours here, and 180 miles outside of Cozumel, Mexico, anticipating a landfall early tomorrow morning. Cozumel is this little island right here. Cancun, a lot of us are familiar with the area because a lot of us go down for vacation. Very tranquil place. The water's warm and tranquil. The beach is kind of like an oatmeal-y sand. It's really fun stuff there. But folks, there's the forecast, which is not fun at all. You see where Texas and Louisiana in particular really in the teeth of this forecast cone, likely a Category 3 up through landfall here. Now, when do the winds start to pick up for us here? Tropical storm force winds likely to begin sometime Friday morning, and it just intensify throughout the day as we work our way up through landfall and beyond. Let's fast forward about 24 hours from now. Mostly an east wind in Louisiana and breezy, but not bad. Then we'll go beyond that as the hurricane gets closer. Let's fast forward to overnight Thursday into Friday morning. Now the winds starting to increase in intensity in Louisiana. Could be gusting as high as 35 miles per hour. Here comes the hurricane. Again, potentially making a landfall in Louisiana. That seems to be, at least if you take the forecast center of the cone, a likeliest bet. The strongest winds will be in the eye wall, especially on the right front quadrant side here. That's where you have the highest storm surge, where you have the most intense winds. As the water's just being pushed in this direction, surge could be significant. That could include Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida's Panhandle could also see water rise here. The winds will be very intense going into Friday. Saturday, they start to back off, come out of the west here as now the system's moved inland here, but could still produce some pretty gusty conditions to Jackson, to Memphis, Huntsville, and beyond. The rain swath is going to be right here in the lower Mississippi River Valley, with a large area getting 3 to 5 inches. A pocket closest to the eye that could get 5 to 8 inches of rain here, but a large area that all the way up through Tennessee and Kentucky could get 2 to 3 inches of rain. A lot of places here, Alex, don't need any more rain. We've been absolutely soaked for 2020, so this truly is just throwing salt on the wounds.
Absolutely. Want to take you back down to the Cancun area. They're waiting in long, long lines for gas. This could actually be the strongest tropical system to strike in more than a decade. Now, the most recent one came not too long ago, just the other day in Tulum. Of course, we were watching Gamma. That one we were tracking over the weekend and into yesterday. Of course, Gamma making landfall near Tulum with winds 70 miles an hour. So a strong tropical storm, pressure down to 980 millibars. Let's show you some video from this storm. This is Gamma, of course. Here's video out of Cozumel. So it looks like some of those really pretty areas. They're set up over the water. They're like, I don't even know. I should look up what this word is that I'm trying. It's like, they're like romantic places, and you can go eat dinner under the awning. Well, they're gonna have to fix them because unfortunately the waves, the rough surf really did a number on them. I think that guy was like, maybe there was some food in there. Then we look from one of the higher rooms. You get that beautiful view out over the water. Well, unfortunately, not a great view. Maybe not the view you were anticipating. If you're like weather savvy, you might like it. But other than that, you're thinking, man, I came all the way down here and this is what I see. Again, kind of a hazy sky. You can't tell where the ocean ends and where the sky begins. And then we look at some of the tree damage done by some of those strong winds from Gamma. Plenty of cleanup needs to be done from this one. And now looking at kind of that 1-2 punch now from a much stronger Delta. So yesterday at 1 o'clock, we had those tropical storm warnings still in effect. Yesterday at 5 o'clock, went under the hurricane warnings because of the window that we were watching. Our next storm approaching. How about that? How's that for truly one after the other? Major hurricanes near Cancun will be adding Delta to the list, but Wilma, back in 2005, the most recent storm of this strength to make landfall near these areas, to impact these areas. So it has been a long time, even though you'd think, gosh, Cancun, it kind of sticks right out there. How has it not seen something like this? It's been a long time. Gilbert, 1988, and then unnamed storms back in 1909 and 1903. So, Mike, while this is an area that's storm savvy, it's been a while since they've seen anything of this strength, and we could be looking at surge values over 10 feet for portions of the Yucatan out of Delta.
That's going to rearrange the coastline in some instances. Alex, thank you. I know they're resilient there in Mexico, and they'll get back on their feet quickly, but it's going to be a tough 24 hours. Well, we know that we've got Hurricane Hunter missions ongoing right now into Delta as it roars toward the Yucatan Peninsula, potentially dealing them a devastating blow. So they've made their first pass through the eye. What exactly are they finding? Our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knapp, is going to break it down for us and tell you what they're finding, what it means for the next advisory, what it means for the forecast, plus more coverage of Delta and everything else on social media. Make sure you check out Pattern on Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram.
But still brought those huge waves crashing onto the roadway and the seawall. Mike, I have a friend who was able to help me out. All 4 hours I have not been able to think of the word that those things are. They are palapas.
A what?
Like a palapa. It's like a deck you sit out on the water and you eat. It's fancy.
Palapa. Oh. I would have just called it like a cabana. Is it
cabana
not a cabana?
Works too. Yeah, no, I couldn't think of any of the
like
words.
The palapa. That's a very fancy way of saying cabana.
Well, yeah, when you go to a fancy resort, they're not going to just call it the deck. You got to call it something different.
That's okay.
More you know.
Hey, listen, whatever puts you in the mood, I guess, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we're going to be watching all of those resort areas that people are very familiar with out there on the Yucatan. I'm Alex Wilson. He's Mike Bettis, and we're actually with you tonight a little longer than usual because we are getting you through and ready for all things Hurricane Delta.
You know, and to your point here, Alex, some beautiful places like Cancun, Mexico, Cozumel, where maybe some of our viewers have been before, very familiar. A lot of beautiful hotels and beaches down there that you can get to relatively quickly and relatively inexpensively, but they could be taking a very hard hit, unfortunately, from Delta. Now, we know we've got some planes that are flying out there right now, including the NOAA planes that are flying upper level and low level and invests into this, crisscrossing through it, trying to figure out what's going on with this. The Air Force planes will resume operations. They're rebasing over in San Antonio because they are evacuating from Keesler Air Force Base in Mississippi because of the approaching hurricane. But these planes, the NOAA planes taking off from Lakeland in Florida, already done one pass through this. So let's bring in our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knabb, to see what they're finding here. Dr. Knabb, anything that's got your interest here?
Well, what's interesting is when you got a hurricane that's really, really small, it can be difficult to find that maximum wind. And when the first passed through it on this mission, they went northwest to southeast, probably not through the strongest part of the hurricane. So when they come in from the northeast here within the next half hour or so, that should be very revealing to see if the winds are as strong as they were earlier and if the pressure has come down, because that means all the difference for what Cancun and Cozumel get, Mike.
When you look at what these planes can do and what their importance is to the fixes, the current observations, the forecasting, what are you most interested to see here over maybe the next 24 hours from these planes?
Well, because it's hard to see the condition of the eye in conventional satellite imagery because it's so small, I want to see how long that small eye holds together. If there's any indication of an eye wall replacement cycle, because that will change the game in terms of the intensity and the size and what condition it is over the Gulf of Mexico. So, but I think somewhere along the line that small eye is going to go away. It will weaken a bit, but then it will get larger. And then we've got a big major hurricane intensifying over the Gulf of Mexico.
In between the NOAA planes and the Air Force planes, you anticipate at this point almost nonstop missions up through landfall?
Absolutely, because both units will be operating nearly continuously, not just flying the P-3s from NOAA and the C-130s from the Air Force into the hurricane, but NOAA's flying the G-4 jet around it and putting data into the models to try to refine